What's good, Savages? Welcome to another episode of Blue Collar Sports. I'm Savage Paulson, and with me, as always, is our very own box score bandit, because he steals the show every single time. Zach McGibbon, how are you?
Doing pretty good, Savage. I love these nicknames. The alliteration that goes into those as well. The box score bandit is so good. I love this. I love how you're getting more creative with these. We're going from, aficionado, savant to the box score bandit. I love it.
I'm trying to give an explanation on why I call it such. Like last week, it was the magic mushroom of sports talk.
That's right.
He enlightens us every time. So I'm like, oh yeah, I gotta run with that. So now I gotta come up with something. Why do we name this? So and it's always like 5 minutes before we start recording. I'm like, oh shit. I'm like, okay, I got to come up with something. So I'm like, just either I'm on Chat GPT and sometimes he's helpful, sometimes he's not. I don't know why I call him he, but
the computer,
the
being,
the AI that seems to be smarter than all of us.
Yeah.
Another great week in sports. A lot of stuff going on, from the NBA playoffs to the NHL playoffs. We're down to 4 teams in both leagues. Also, the announcement from the Toronto Maple Leafs that they will not be bringing back Brendan Shanahan as team president. I want to discuss this a little bit. I also want to discuss the top MLB storylines. A lot of things going on early in the season, from Juan Soto not doing so well with the Mets right now. A little bit of drama going on, from Ohtani getting ready to pitch, maybe due to face some hitters in a simulated game, to Acuna coming back yesterday and hitting a home run in his first at bat. A lot of things to discuss, but let's start here. NBA playoffs are in full swing. We're down to 4 teams, East and West, Eastern Conference Finals, Western Conference Finals, all that going on right now. Pacers versus Knicks. Yesterday, Pacers are now up 2-0 on New York, which is a surprise considering that both games were at Madison Square Garden. I've watched both games, not at the entirety, but I definitely watched the end of the game. Game 1 was crazy. Knicks were up big. They kind of blew a huge lead and let the Pacers come back into the game and lost in overtime with that big clutch shot from Halliburton that he thought it was a 3, so he threw up the choke sign a la Reggie Miller. But he kind of regretted it after. I said, if I knew it was only a 2, I wouldn't have thrown up. I would have kept that. He said, I kind of burnt it. I can't really use it anymore. But it was still kind of apropos, if you ask me, because I do think the Knicks kind of choked it a little bit in game 1. By watching both these games, I will notice that the Knicks are kind of looking a little bit weak on defense here. They're letting the Pacers go on big runs, and there's never, ever a moment where, even if the Knicks go on a 7-0 run or a 10-0 run or a little run of their own, they're always letting the Pacers either back in the game or get back in their rhythm. I will say this, after watching yesterday's game, like, Brunson looked like he was very fatigued at the end of the game. Like, he was leaning and he was breathing hard. I think it's been a long playoffs for the New York Knicks. It's been a long playoffs for all the teams, but it's been a long playoffs for the Knicks. I think there's a lot more pressure on the New York Knicks to win this series and to go to an NBA Finals. I think in the media, at least, I see it that way, and I think that the Pacers are kind of coming into this like they did last year, not expected to be where they're at right now, especially not playing like they're playing. I must say, Halliburton and Pascal Siakam yesterday with 39 points yesterday. I mean, let's go. And even in his post-game interview, he said it doesn't matter who scores. He said, I was hot. My team found me and just happened to score 39 points. I mean, it's been a crazy series. Like I said, I'm a bit surprised that we're up here 2-0 for the Pacers. I thought it would be at least 1-1 going into Indiana. What's your thoughts on the first 2 games here in the Eastern Conference Finals?
Yeah, so I was able to catch game one of the Pacers and Knicks series, and I did see, Halliburton put up the choke sign, looking right at Spike Lee, too, by the way, and also pointed out Reggie Miller, who was calling the game courtside. So I thought that was cool. I know that it ended up being a 2 instead of a 3. It looked like a 3 on TV at first. I thought,
Yeah, me too.
like Halliburton, like, oh my gosh, he scored the 3 and it would have been perfect, but still ended up all right for the Pacers. This has been quite an entertaining series. And like you mentioned, I think there is a little bit of a surprise because of the fact that they have been able to win on the road in the case of the Pacers and being able to really take it to New York. And I think it goes back to one of the unspoken aspects, I think, when it comes to this series is, Pascal Siakam. I'm glad you mentioned him as well, coming in with 39 points in game 2. I think he brings experience as well because he's somebody that was with the Raptors in 2019 as part of their team, and he didn't have to be a focal point on that team as well. That was, Kawhi Leonard, Kyle Lowry was also taking the ball, but he could still contribute. And for a time, Pascal Siakam could be a number one option for the Raptors. They were hoping he could be that for Toronto once, Kawhi left, and then you started to see a little bit more of them relying on Pascal Siakam. Now, in this case, he's got other players like Tyrese Halliburton, as you mentioned, that he can, lean on. But if he needs to be a focal point, he has the experience to be a factor in the NBA Finals. And so, obviously, having him in the lineup is big. In the case of the Knicks, we've kind of been seeing the praises of Jalen Brunson and how well he's been able to do throughout this playoffs, and he's always been a consistent performer. But now I think when it comes to the Knicks, I think you want to have a little bit more of support around him. It's tough to be that lone guy that they rely on, and when you're talking about fatigue, that's usually the case. Obviously, as well, you got other players that they've got some good players on the Knicks. We obviously talk about Karl Anthony Towns, another former Raptor I should mention, in OG Anunoby as well.
Yeah.
He had 16 points for the Knicks in game 2. And so,
I mean, the Knicks spread it around yesterday. You had Bridges with 20 points, Bronson with 36 points. You had Towns with 20, Anunoby with 16. So they were a little bit more spreading the ball around yesterday, but still Brunson with 36 in a great performance in the loss.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting. Like when you lose on the road in any sort of playoff series, whether it be basketball or hockey, when you're losing at home, that's always real tough because that does kind of get into the mindset. And especially in a big market like New York, this is the first time that the Knicks have been in the Eastern Conference finals for a long, long time. I don't know off the top of my head, over 20 years at least anyways.
Yeah.
And so it all kind of gets amplified a little bit. The magnitude kind of increases a little bit from that. And so I think, we always say the cliche, every game is important in the playoffs and whatnot. But if you're going into game 3 on the road, you want to kind of establish, look, we may lose at home, but we can win on the road. And a big time win on the road in game 3 can certainly be something that can boost the confidence for the Knicks.
Yeah, I think, look, I don't think the Knicks are going to get swept here. Like you said, it's hard to start the series too, especially when both games were at home. So now you're going in Indiana. It's going to be hard to, but I do believe that if any team could do it with Brunson, I think give him an extra day off and he'll be back to being the clutch player he is. And again, it's not like he wasn't clutch. He scored 36 points yesterday. I think just to point out a great point you make on Siakam about him not being the focal point of the team. He wasn't the focal point on the Raptors when they went on to win their first NBA championship a few years back. That was Leonard and Kyle Lowry and other pieces. And now you look at him on the Pacers, he's still not the focal point. I think that's, they're not look, Halliburton is a great player. He's most likely the number one player on that team if you want, but they're more of a balanced team. There's no real he's their number one player, but I'm still having a hard time seeing him as a big superstar that everybody else seems to talk about. He was voted the most overrated player by his peers, by other players this season. And I think that's a huge chip on his shoulder right now for Halliburton. I think he's like, oh yeah, you want to call me over? So he's in there just trying to prove them wrong. It's good for him. I like him as a player. I like the Pacers. Again, I like the Knicks as well. And I do hope that they come back in game 3 and have a really big performance to make a series out of this. Because it'd be really, for two things, I think it'd be really, it would suck for the Knicks if they would go down 3-0 after game 3. And also for basketball, I think we deserve a great series here. And for me, it's like, yeah, if the Knicks make it to the finals, great for them. It's been a while. They haven't won a championship since, I want to say 71. I think that's what it is.
Yep.
I might be wrong about that. And the Pacers obviously have never won a championship, so it'd be great. And then, so yeah, I'm looking forward to game 3. I'm sure both game 1 and game 2 were really good, really close. Even yesterday was back and forth. The Knicks were trying to make a run, and then the Pacers would always, would chop it down to 3 points, and then they would just go back up by 6, 7. So looking forward for game 3 on this. Moving on to the other series, the Minnesota Timberwolves versus OKC. A bit of a different story here, even though OKC is up 2-0. I've watched both games. One thing I will say, look, Anthony Edwards is a hell of a player, but right now I'm having a hard time. It's tough to beat the best team in the league when you're only one man. I'm having a hard time. He seems to be lacking some support here in these conference finals. He had a great performance.
32 points is what I've got here.
32 points in the last game. So still a good performance, but then you look, there's McDaniels that had 22 points. Then the rest of the team, 17, 10, 5, 3, 6 points, so you're falling back. And then you look at OKC, you got the now MVP in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander had 38 points in game 2. Had a huge performance. He looks great in this series. The big difference for me in this series is OKC's defense is just, you could see it, their pressure, they don't give any space to the Timberwolves. They're on their player with the pressure right from once that the ball gets past half court, the pressure's there. Defense has been, the turnovers have been the key, I think, in this. I think the Timberwolves had way too many turnovers in the first 2 games, and that's one of the big reasons why they're down 0-2 here. It's another series though that mirrors the Knicks and the Pacers in the fact that I was expecting a lot more from the Wolves. Did pick the OKC to win this playoff. I think their real big test for OKC was the Denver Nuggets. I think that was kind of the hump they needed to get over to beat the MVP or the competition at MVP and Jokic. And they ended up having a tough time, but they ended up beating the Nuggets, and now it's kind of a boost to their confidence with that win. And now they came in here and they're up 2-0 against the Timberwolves. Again, for me, it's the defense of the OKC. If they keep playing like this, I'm going to have a hard time picking any other team to make it to the finals and winning it all.
Yeah, when I was looking at this series, my initial idea of kind of seeing it in the players was this is kind of a showcase of potential future faces of the NBA. Like, I know that, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is already pretty accomplished. As you mentioned, he won the MVP. But, as we start to get a little bit further and LeBron's only got a year or 2 left or however many years, but it's not going to be in the next decade or anything like that, you start to set up this next generation of NBA stars. And I think something like this can be pretty big in terms of establishing that with, Anthony Edwards has always been a guy that you hear about as like he could be a new face of the league not once LeBron is gone. And so this could be a big showcase for him. And in the case of OKC, they've been able to, utilize all the assets that they've built over the last couple of years from the Russell Westbrook trade and being able to get all these players and, eventually being able to land on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who they were able to trade for. So I look at the kind of the box score here, and it's interesting you mentioned defense because I look at Julius Randle and Rudy Gobert, 2 sort of players. In the case of Randle, a power forward, Rudy Gobert, the center. And I see in game 2, Rudy Gobert, 5 points, Julius Randle, 6 points. So they're not really getting those interior board play that they're hoping for from their bigs. And that usually means when you got a good defense, you're keeping them to the outside and preventing any sort of offense into the court there. So that's how I kind of see it from there. And but it's been a great showcase for Oklahoma City as well. And I think now that Shea Gilgeous-Alexander has that MVP award that he could put up on his shelf as well, I think there's a little bit more motivation to say, not only am I going to be the MVP of the regular season, I want to be MVP of the NBA Finals and try and win a championship. But they've looked real strong so far in this series, and I think it's been a little bit more of a dominant play from OKC.
Yeah, I see kind of it's like now that the news of the MVP's been announced, it's like, okay, now we can breathe. We don't have to talk about it or think about it anymore. Even though it was kind of expected that he was going to win, there were still some people that thought maybe Jokic would get some votes and stuff. But now that it's kind of been established and voted on and announced that he's the MVP, it's like, all right, great. I'm here now. Let's move on and let's dominate in these playoffs. Again, it's great to see. I think it's a small market, OKC, when it comes to basketball. You did mention all the players, like from the Westbrook to the Kevin Durant to the Paul George to the Chris Paul, to all the players that have been through that system, through that team. It's hard to believe that they've never really made it past the Eastern Conference Finals. Did they ever make it to the finals? I'm trying to think about it. I don't think so.
They might have made it once. That was the big thing with those Thunder teams in the 2010s was they always had these really great teams on paper, as you mentioned, with the Russell Westbrook, Kevin Durant, and James Harden as well on those squads. But I don't believe they went to a finals. If they did, it was only one time because they just kept running into a bunch of really strong players. Yeah, I'm just looking through. They went to the finals one time in 2011 to 2012 against the Miami Heat, and they took on the LeBron James and the Big Three.
Yeah,
so that was the one time. So the early 2010s, but after that, it was like conference finals loss, semis loss, first round loss in the later part of the 2010s into 2020, and that's just kind of the end of the Russell Westbrook you mentioned as well. Paul George and Chris Paul also, had a cup of coffee there in OKC. Yeah, it's interesting how they've just never been able to get over that hump, especially with how strong the teams have been that they have had, continue to have. And I think it's a testament to them. They had those 2 years, one during the pandemic and one just coming out of the bubble there, where they were just kind of rebuilding themselves and trying to get themselves back on a winning streak. And again, they've been able to rely on Shea Gilgeous-Alexander to be at the forefront of their rebuild. And I think it's just been a real strong use of the resources that they've been able to accumulate from those teams and saying, all right, we're not going to be able to win this with this squad. We're going to rebuild. And I think the Philadelphia 76ers should be taking some notes on that, on how to get their squad going.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of teams that should take note from the OKC Thunders. And they're fun to watch. And I enjoy watching them. And I'm looking forward to more games from the Game 3, Game 4, now moving on to Minnesota. So this should be fun. I hope Minnesota makes a series out of it, but I expect the OKC to come out on top here and make it to the NBA Finals. Moving on to the NHL playoffs. 4 teams left. I haven't been paying that much attention. I kind of check out the highlights, so I'm going to let you speak a little bit more here on this and what your thoughts on. First off, let's look at the Canes versus the Panthers. From game 1, the Panthers looked extremely dominant here. They are up 2-0 in the series, right? So they've looked dominant, winning 5-0 and 5-2, I believe. It's like
emphatic
Panthers look
wins.
on a mission, right? It's they look on a mission to repeat and as champions. They won last year. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh yeah, they almost blew it last year against the Oilers, but they were able to win it in Game 7. So
right. So what's your thoughts on this series? Are the Panthers just too strong for their Hurricanes, or is it just a question of the Hurricanes needing to make a few adjustments here to make a series out of it?
It's been weird with the Hurricanes. Whenever they go into a conference final, they look really strong the first 2 rounds, but then they forget that they have to win another 8 games afterwards, and then they all of a sudden they just never seem to get past in the conference finals. They just disappear. I mean, the Hurricanes, they were in the conference finals last year, if I recall, and they were not able to do well in that either. So they've lost 14 straight conference finals games. Every time they've been in, they just can't win in the conference finals, whatever it is. And I like a lot of the assets on that team. I mean, Rod Brindamore, who's a former player. I remember when it was Oilers Hurricanes in Stanley Cup in 05, 06.
Yes.
Brendan Moore was the defenseman on that team for the Hurricanes. He's a really strong coach, and he's led some good Hurricanes teams, but for whatever reason in these playoffs, they just seem to come out flat.
Yeah.
And in the case of the Panthers, I mean, I think people were expecting it to be a little bit more competitive, only because the Panthers are kind of going in it. It seems like they're a little bit beaten up going into the conference finals. They may not have been 100%, but boy, the Panthers are showing why they're the defending Stanley Cup champions with this core that they've got here. I mean, just a strong team, and you just look at it from the games. I mean, sometimes you could see like 5-2. It could be deceptive because in the third period they had like 3 late goals, but it's just been strong play throughout from the Florida Panthers. And so obviously tough in the case of Carolina. The big, obstacle that they've got to overcome is actually win a game in the conference finals.
Right.
It's so, it's funny. I like to make fun of the Leafs because it's the Leafs, but about their playoff success. But you look at Carolina, man, like first 2 rounds, they impress you with the talent that they have. Sebastian Aho especially is a guy that I like on that team. Yeah. Taylor Hall's on this Hurricane squad. They've got talent, but for whatever reason, they just can never overcome that hump and get themselves past the conference final. Not even win a game of the conference finals. So right now it's just Florida showing why they belong in this far in the playoffs.
And once the story becomes about them being 0-14 in their last, having lost 14 games in a row in the conference finals, then they start hearing those stories, and then it most likely gets in their head as well, and then it gets even harder for them to get over that hump. I hope for the Canes it's the question of just getting 1 win and then being able to go, okay, we can do this, and build confidence from that. Again, I'm indifferent who wins here, the Panthers or the Canes. I'm more worried. I'm more interested in the other series, in the Oilers and the Stars, because it's the last Canadian team, and I'd like to see the Oilers get back to the finals, but win it this time, and not like last year, So I'm like you, it's hard to watch a team make it so far and then have such a lackluster. You're like, ugh, it's too bad for them. You've worked so hard, you've won 2 series, and then you don't show up when you get to the conference finals, it's a shame for the Hurricanes. Because Rob Brendamore, I mean, is the epitome of hard work. I mean, Look, I remember him, the big story when he was a player is how hard he would work when he's not on the ice. Physique-wise, he was always in the gym. He was always in shape, always ready to go, even late in his career as he got older. And he's been how long has he been their coach? It's been a long time, no?
For a while, and he still has that, by the way. He still runs up and down the steps at the arena. I should mention, by the way, the 14 straight games lost in the conference finals. The last time that the Hurricanes won in the conference final was that year they won the Stanley Cup, and Rod Brindamore was the defenseman on that team in 2006. That was when they won in Game 7 in 2006. Yeah, not exactly a great run of success when it comes to the conference finals since then. And I should clarify too, last year they were in the second round. It was the year before where they faced the Panthers, where they got swept again.
Yeah.
And so, it's just been, they just can't seem to get it done. And it's just mind boggling at the end of how it's just been consistently like that in Carolina. And Florida, again, just taking advantage of it. Florida going in and just overwhelming their opponents.
So moving on to the other series, the Western Conference Finals, the Oilers, the Stars here. The Oilers were able to come back in Game 2 and dominate Skinner with the third shutout of the playoffs, I believe. Because in Game 1, it looked good for the Oilers early on. I tuned in quickly. It was 3-1. I'm like, oh, good for the Oilers. The 3-1. And then I kind of I think I moved on to the basketball game or doing something else. And then all of a sudden I watched the score. I'm like, oh, let me tune back to see what the score is. I look on my phone and they ended up losing 6-3 with 5 unanswered goals in the third period from the Stars. I mean, we all know how good the Stars, this Dallas team is. I mean, we spoke about it a few episodes ago before the playoffs at the end of the regular season. I believe you said they were one of the favorites to win it all. They're strong. They have depth on their team. But this Oilers team seems to be right there. They made it to the finals last year, took it to Game 7. It just wasn't enough. Do you think the Oilers have enough left in the tank to get over this strong team in Dallas and to make it back to the playoff to the NHL Stanley Cup Finals?
I think they do. The big thing with the Oilers whenever they play games in these playoffs is that they always seem to give up the first game, but they always seem to come back and keep it a fight. And I'll tell you this, when it comes to Connor McDavid, he's going to come hell or high water to drag this team along to try and get some success. Right. So I say it more because I think that top end, especially McDavid, but obviously, you know, you look at Draisaitl as well, and Evan Bouchard on the back end, a strong defenseman that can score and produce. I think they've got enough to be able to keep it competitive. I feel bad for Stuart Skinner sometimes. He just takes the brunt of so much in Edmonton, mainly because he's just so wildly inconsistent. And this series is kind of, you know, emblematic of that, where you see in that third period, he lets in those goals, 5 straight goals in the third. And then in this game 2, he's able to come up with a shutout. Like, that's kind of the Stuart Skinner experience, is sometimes you're just going to you look at it and you're like, how is this guy a starting goaltender in the NHL? Like, why does he continue to get starts? And then you get the other aspect of like, there's a reason why he continues to get starts, because when he's on and he's locked in, he can keep his team in it. And that's been the thing with Skinner going all the way back to the last year's Stanley Cup final as well. I mean, they've had to pull him and they've had to put in their backup goaltenders. And this will be something that the Oilers will have to look at next year. And it's funny of me saying that because that's also something they said last year, but they decided to go ahead with this goalie duo. If they want to keep McDavid in Edmonton, and you always hear the talks about McDavid's going to go to this place, he's going to go to the States and play for an American team. Or, you know, I had some Leafs fans tell me McDavid will finally find a way to come to Toronto, you know. We'll see about that. But all that to say, if they want to keep McDavid, they got to build some more pieces around him and make this a much more well-rounded team, because you can rely on McDavid. And I think that's what their GM has been able to is trying to do is like, look, we can build enough and try and go there, but we know what we have in McDavid to keep ourselves and be competitive in the playoffs, because McDavid has that it factor.
Right.
But I think they certainly can keep competitive with the Stars. I mean, you know, you mentioned, I talked about it a couple episodes ago of just how deep this team is. And you just look at the players on this team: Miro Heiskanen, Tyler Seguin, Mikko Rantanen, Jason Robertson, Jamie Benn's an older guy now, but like Jamie Benn is still like Evgeny Dadonov, when he's on, can play pretty well. Matt Duchene, Mikkel Granlund, like, I could go on and on about some of the players that they have on this team and the depth that they have. And if there's ever a time for the Stars to get over this hump, it's coming off of the acquisition of Mikko Rantanen and being able to get into the finals. So I think this will be very much a shootout between both of these teams. I think it'll be very competitive. Wouldn't shock me if it goes all the way to Game 7 and whatnot. But this is far from over. This is going to be a competitive series, and I'm really looking forward to this. And obviously, you know, as the Canadian factor, you want your Canadian team to get themselves into the final, and the Oilers have kind of been that de facto team the last little bits. As a Canadian wanting to see a Canadian team in the final and get a first Stanley Cup back in the great land of Canada, since 1993 was when the Habs won it. Sir. So we'll see where it goes from there. But that's kind of how it's looking for this Oilers Stars series.
Yeah, I'm expecting a very tough series. I think it's going to be back and forth. I get a feeling it's going to be one game, back and forth, all the way to Game 7 to a decisive game. So I'm looking forward to this series because, like you said, there's so much power, so much star power on both ends. McDavid on one side and then the extreme. I don't follow hockey at all, but every single name I knew 75% of the name you just named on that Stars team. And I'm like, holy shit, like they all have the players. Like, I know these guys, so I know they're good because I just recognize the name. So I'm like, fuck, and again, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to equate to success, but like the Stars are packed when it comes to talent, and it seems to be the right time and the right moment for them to get over the hump and win a Stanley Cup right now in the moment. Staying with hockey right now, let's stick with hockey. Talking about the Maple Leafs a few minutes ago, you mentioned the Toronto Maple Leafs. Let's stick with them. It was announced this week that by their CEO of, I don't know who owns the Maple Leafs now.
Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment.
Right. It's like a conglomerate of companies.
Yep.
I don't know. But that's a different story for a different day, in my opinion. But announcing that they would not bring back Brendan Shanahan as team president after 11 seasons. It's been there for a while. It has not equated to a Stanley Cup. And there's a lot of different directions I could come. It's kind of a straightforward, like, okay, Maple Leaf failed again. We saw how bad it ended with them and not being able to perform, score goals. So many different storylines with the Maple Leafs, right? They're at it again. It's the same old story, blah, blah, blah. It felt like somebody's head had to roll. Somebody had to take the blame. People were like, obviously, you're not going to can the coach after the season. I think the coach was a big reason for their success. I think we spoke about it a couple episodes ago. I think he did a really good job. But then you look at the players and you're like, well, the players are going to be the players with contract and stuff. So at the end of the day, they decide to not bring back Brendan Shanahan. I mean, again, I'm not too knowledgeable on the workings of when it comes to team management and all that. Maybe you can enlighten me. But my question about all this is that this is what surprised me. Okay, he's out as team president and will not renew his contract after 11 seasons. And immediately, within the same day, within hours of the announcement, there were talks about how he was going to move on to the New York Islanders and how he was going to become the president or whatever position high up for the New York Islanders. And it got me thinking, I'm like, this seems like and this has been thrown out there in the hockey before, it's like a good old boys club. It's always the same coaches, the same GMs, the same presidents. Obviously, Brendan Shanahan, former player, great career. Obviously, he had some success in Toronto, but ultimately, you want to equate success by winning a Stanley Cup, which is something he didn't do. Obviously, considering that there's already talk that he's going to be with the New York Islanders minutes or hours after it was announced that he wasn't going to be the president of the Maple Leafs, and it leads you to believe, okay, maybe he's good at his job, or maybe it's just a rotation of things. It makes me think and makes me want to ask, like, because I've seen this in other sports, either in NBA or NFL, where they start bringing in coaches and GMs and people from the outside, people that might have not grown up in the business, people that seem to be smart, knowledgeable about the thing. Do you think there's going to be a time where this is going to happen in the NHL, where you're going to start seeing new names and people you've never heard of get some of these positions, either at be VP of hockey operations or president or even GMs or coaches for that matter?
Yeah, it's tough with hockey because it's like there hasn't been that coach that has really come in with this revolutionary game plan to really kind of. The big thing with the NFL is like when you have Kyle Shanahan coming in, then you have all the people from that tree that are coming from that Kyle Shanahan tree that comes in. And so there hasn't been a lot of innovation when it comes to some of the play of the game or some of the plays that have been developed by coaches. So that's why you see a lot more of a recycling of coaches, for lack of a better term. Right. So that's why guys like John Tortorella is still getting coaching jobs. Right. And, Peter Laviolette is getting another coaching job. And Mike Sullivan just got announced as the head coach for the Rangers. Because a lot of the times there is a familiarity aspect to it. When it comes to Shanahan and his work, it was kind of different because he was a familiar name, had a Hall of Fame career with the Red Wings, great player when he played, and knows how to win when he was a player. Like, he was in some really strong Detroit Red Wings teams, was part of the league office afterwards, and then really when he was the executive for the Leafs, that was his first time being an executive for an NHL team. So it was all kind of new for him, sort of learning everything. So it's funny now where it's like he's going to the Islanders. So kind of looking at it from the lens of what he was able to accomplish. I think the big thing when he came in, and a lot of people, I don't want to say forget, but as time kind of moves on, it kind of slips some people's mind. But I think people forget just how much in disarray that Leafs organization was before he came in. Because it was not like they had a bunch of different years. Dave Nonis was the GM for a bit, and Brian Burke was the GM, and they just were not able to get into the playoffs. Last time they were in the playoffs at that point before Shanahan came in was in 05, 06, and they were just constantly rebuilding and trying to find the solution. They thought it would be Phil Kessel. They thought it would be, all these different guys, and it just never ended up being able to come together. And so I think Shanahan did a good job of being able to go in and establish a culture and say, look, we can't be doing this anymore. This is what we have to do to win. And one of the big successes that he had off the ice was rebuilding relationships with old Toronto Maple Leafs, because a lot of those, like, they didn't want to be associated with the franchise. The franchise sort of turned them off, and they didn't want to. He did a good job of coming in and reestablishing those relationships and saying, hey, that was an old, organization. Like, some of them were from Ballard era Leafs,
Right.
They came in and said, look, we're going to honor you guys. We're going to retire your numbers. We're going to respect the legacy that you left in Toronto. And I think he did a great job of, reestablishing a lot of relationships. If you go over to Scotiabank Arena, you have the Legends Row, I believe it's what it's called, and they have all these sort of statues for old players. So I think he did a great job on that of reestablishing, those relationships and bringing the history of the franchise together. On the ice, they were able to get to the playoffs, and they were able to get to the playoffs 9 straight years. But obviously the success, they've only been able to get to the second round twice during that time, and they've never been able to get past the second round. And I think ultimately the undoing of Shanahan was, doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on the core 4, even when it was pretty clear that, while yes, they're very talented in the regular season, and yes, they got some great players, and some of those players will end up, from a stats perspective, some of the greatest Leafs to play. They just were never able to turn that into playoff success, and they were so reliant on this core that they were afraid to make any sort of changes to that core. And so you saw all these teams, it's like, this team's different because the goaltending's improved on this, or the defense is improved on that. But it was always went back to the core 4. How did they perform in the playoffs when it mattered most? And they just didn't perform. And they had an out, I don't want to say an out clause, but they had a chance to do that with Marner a couple of years ago, where his no movement clause would kick in. And then they fired Kyle Dubas, the former general manager. They brought in Brad Treliving, and they had him. This was 5 weeks before the no movement clause came in. And they said, we're going to keep him. And then as the years went on, they tried to say, are you willing to waive that no movement clause? And Marner's like, well, I've got a kid coming and I've got a family here. I don't want to move. I've got this option. Like, I don't want to, and I don't blame him. Like, if you've got that option and you're looking at everything, like, you got to take advantage of what you've got. And so I think now you've got Marner that's probably going to leave in free agency, and you were never able to get any sort of assets in return if you traded him. And so you're going to let this guy that produced so much for your team, I believe had 100 points, over 100 points this past season, and you're just going to let him walk for free and not get anything in return. I think that's just ultimately what it goes down to, is that they relied so much on the core. They thought this year is going to be the one where they finally get over the hump, and this year they're going to do that. But with them being so reliant on it, the definition of insanity, right? They got the same results each year, and it's like, now they're finally like, Marner's got to move on. Who knows about Tavares? He might be there on a price cut, less than what they were paying him. So it opens up some stuff in the cap to do some things with the Leafs and change up the team a little bit. I firmly believe Nylander and Matthews will still be there for years to come, especially Nylander. I think that was ultimately Brendan Shanahan's undoing, is, they brought in all these different guys. First it was Lou Lamoriello. And then it was Kyle Dubas, and now it's Brad Treliving, and they brought in new coaches, and they tried all these different things. But the absolute reason why they were not able to win, it was always obvious when it came to the stats. It always was obvious when you watched the games. It always went back to that core 4, and they had to do stuff to change the core 4. So I think that was ultimately Shanahan's undoing. And I think you got other teams, like you mentioned with the Islanders, they're looking in at bringing him in. It's kind of ironic because their previous executive was Lou Lamoriello, who Shanahan brought in.
And Patrick Roy's the coach.
And Patrick Roy's the coach.
And they had the biggest rivalry when the Avalanche back in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
Avalanche
Claude
and the
Lemieux
Red Wings,
and Darren McCarty. Absolutely. That was a great rivalry. Right. And so, yeah, I mean, I look at all that, and I think I think Shanahan certainly deserves another opportunity. I think he did a good enough job in terms of reestablishing a culture in Toronto. I think ultimately his undoing was just doubling down, tripling down on this core when it was pretty obvious that it should move on. And when any sort of opportunity to kind of move on from them, before he fired Dubas in his press conference said, we might have to look at changes to the core this year, because he knew that the no movement clause was going to come in for Marner. I think ultimately when Dubas got fired, they just were like, all right, we're committed to this, and we're going to try and find a way to overcome. We're going to find the right puzzle pieces around the core so that we can finally get over the hump. And it just wasn't the case. So I know that was a little bit long and rambly, but I think that's just ultimately it was the Leafs' undoing, is they was so committed to that core that it ultimately was Shanahan's undoing.
I think it's a great point. It was long, but it was all a great point. And one thing I would add to that, and it proves that as much as, like you mentioned, for the core four there in Toronto, it's great that and I think this is more prevalent in the NHL than in any other sport. There's certain players that'll take you to the playoffs, and there's certain players that'll make you win in the playoffs. And sometimes those are not the same players. So as you mentioned, I think Toronto did a great job finding the players to take you to the playoffs, but they did a really crappy job at finding the players that were going to make you win in the playoffs. And I always equate it to, if you're going to have 3 or 4 guys just play their asses off all season, score all these goals, be so successful, after 80-some games, you're going to get to the playoffs and you're going to be like, guys, somebody else is going to have to pick it up from here, because we're just there's some fatigue. Obviously, you don't want to say that because they're professional athletes, but I think there's a little bit of truth there. You see it in other sports as well, but not as prevalent, I think, in the NHL. And I think a big one of the teams that did a great job, and maybe to finish this off on the hockey talk here, if the Florida Panthers go on and repeat as champion, I think one of the biggest factors here was the trade to get Brad Marchand on their team. Because Brad Marchand is known to be one of those guys to help you win in the playoff. He's one of those gritty, tough players that just brings it. And look at him now. I mean, I think he's been a big factor in the Panthers being so dominant right now in the playoffs.
Yep, and the team that they've been able to build around, and there's a difference between, like, Matthew Tkachuk was invisible during the Leafs series, but Matthew Tkachuk knows how to play in the playoffs, and Marchand, as you mentioned, and sometimes it just takes guys stepping up and understanding that, it's not just about skill when it comes to the playoffs. It's also about being physical. It's about being gritty sometimes.
Yeah. And
that's what the Panthers are, is like, they're not afraid to get down and dirty, much to the dismay of some other fan bases. And I understand that, but sometimes it's not the cleanest way to win. I mean, if I want to take a basketball analogy, you look at the Pistons of the late 80s to early 90s. Were they exactly the cleanest, most skilled team to go and win an NBA championship with those bad boy Pistons? No, but they knew how to win, and they were able to build, and it obviously led to Jordan realizing how they were able to win and having to adapt it for himself.
Right.
So, you relate it back to hockey. Like, I'm not saying the Panthers are the bad boy Pistons or anything like that, where they're just cheap shotting everybody.
Right.
But they're a team that understands what it takes. Like, it's not just the skill players that are going to get you to the promised land. It's also, you got to have a little bit of toughness and some grit.
Yeah.
And I think that's just something that the Leafs were kind of lacking. And this was one of the more well-rounded Leafs teams that they've had in years. Couturier even understood that and said, we need to get some grittier guys. So they brought in a Chris Tanev. They brought in, Max Pacioretty, who knows how to win in the playoffs.
Right.
Guys that can be underneath on that bottom six that can play. In the case of Pacioretty, and in the case of Tanev, was a good defenseman. But again, just goes back to the core.
Yeah, good point all around. Moving on to some Major League Baseball. Still early in the season. I still consider, until we get to like mid-July, we're early in the season. A lot of things can happen. All-Star game. You get past the All-Star game, I think everything changes for baseball. There's so many games, 162 game season. But there's some really good, interesting storylines developing. So there's a lot I marked down there, like 5 or 6. We're going to get through them as fast as we can. there's a lot of things. I'm excited about baseball. Definitely one thing I didn't put on this is that I'm seeing a lot of young players really, really bring it early in the season. Pete Crow Armstrong with the Cubs right now is just on fire. He was rookie season last year. The Cubs kind of fly under the radar sometimes because they're not they're not one of those most successful teams in the last few years, but they're trying to slowly kind of try rebuilding. They have a lot of good players. Pitching is stellar, and Peter Crow Armstrong seems to be really bringing it this season. So I'm excited to watch these guys. A lot of young core players. I've been paying attention to even the guys in the minors. There's so many good young players. That's what I love about baseball. Let's start here with one of the top storylines. Acuna last year tore his ACL, out for the season early on, and had to rebuild. Came back yesterday, first game back from injury, hits a home run. Look, Acuna was the reigning MVP last year. He won the MVP 2 seasons ago, and then got injured last year. It kind of got taken away. Obviously, Ronald Acuna Jr. is one of the best players in the majors in these past few years. Extremely talented players. The Braves kind of needed him because the Braves have been kind of sucky early on in the season, and they were struggling big time. If I look at their standing right now, 24-26, so it's below 500. They were struggling. They're kind of fighting back in their division, but still you got the Mets to compete with, which are strong at 30-21, and then you got the Phillies at 33-18. A very strong team with the Phillies. They've won 8 in a row. You got Bryce Harper. You got some strong pitching. So the National League East is very strong. So the Braves definitely needed Ronald Acuna back and to light a fire under their asses, basically. And you saw it yesterday. He brought the energy. He brought his character. So hopefully for the Braves, it means because look, the Braves, I'm not a big fan of, I'm a fan of their team. I'm a fan of Acuna. I'm a fan of a lot of players in the major leagues, which subsequently makes me a fan of the team, or at least follow along, when it comes to that stuff. It's great to see him back. Is he going to have an MVP type season? Maybe he comes in and just starts playing and starts hitting home runs and starts raking in the RBIs and makes the big defensive plays, but he's been out for a while, so hopefully this doesn't affect him as much, because baseball players, you got to get back. Sometimes it takes a while for them to get back in the routine, get back in the flow of the game, playing a lot of games and having missed so long for him. So, it's great to see him back.
Yeah, you mentioned the home run there as well, electrifying, and I should also mention as well his throw out from the outfield to second base was so good, and I was like, wow. Sometimes when you really see when a guy's been gone for a while, then all of a sudden you get that impact player back in there and you start to see it and you're like, wow, we really miss this guy and his abilities. And so it's not just on the batter's box, it's also out in the field as well that they've been missing Acuna. So I've always been a fan of, when you got your star players back out on the field playing at their best, it's always good for the game. And in the case of the Braves, they've had some success in the division, being able to win a bunch of division titles and all that and go to the playoffs.
Right.
But it's all about trying to get over the hump now and trying to get themselves into that finals conversation, because they always seem to be a team that can consistently get to the playoffs but never go extra further. And in the case of the Braves last year, they were dealing with injuries, so that's obviously going to play a factor in that. But now that they've got Acuna back, I'm sure that will help with them trying to get themselves on the right path.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we move on to my next storyline in the major leagues, which was Rafael Devers really heating up here with his play, considering he started the year 0-19 with 15 strikeouts. I remember the talk being like, oh, Devers is not happy being DH and da-da-da. And I think some of those were valid. I think he wasn't happy. Bregman obviously came in the offseason, and he's an obvious better third baseman than Devers. Not saying Devers is not a good third baseman, but Bregman is a Gold Glove and Rafael Devers was not. So it was an obvious move to put him at DH. Devers is a really good hitter. And I started off the season like he wasn't really happy, like he was a little bit pouty and a little bit bitchy. And all of a sudden, maybe somebody got in his ear or he realized that he had an opportunity here. And leading the majors now with 47 RBIs ever since that time, 12 home run, I believe, went 4 for 4 the other night with 8 RBIs with a grand slam. I mean, let's go. Like Rafael Devers, I'm happy for him. But let's stick with the Red Sox because I was going through my phone. I didn't put this down. So Bregman's been dealing with an injury, which I didn't know about. Apparently, his left quad injury that is believed to be worse than he initially thought. So there's a stint on the IL is possible here, and never more so than what they just called up about an hour ago. The Red Sox called up their prize shortstop prospect, Marcelo Meyer, which I've been eyeing since the last couple of years. I think he is going to be a very, very good shortstop, a very, very good player in the majors for the Red Sox. So something to keep an eye on here for the Red Sox. They've been playing stellar baseball. They've moved themselves up in second place in the AL East behind the Yankees. They're still only a 500 baseball team, but still enough to be second place in the AL East. Obviously, Bregman is a big part in their chances of winning here. But if he is going to go on IL, I'm excited to see some play from Marcelo Meyer here in the thing. But going back to Rafael Devers, he's a huge part of the Boston Red Sox. And if the Red Sox are going to have any type of success this season and trying to get into the playoffs, Rafael Devers is going to have to be part of this team. He's going to have to be the leader. He's been there for a while. He's lasted through some pretty bad Boston Red Sox teams in the last few years that weren't really good, but Devers has always been an offensive juggernaut. So what do you make of this surge from Devers? Is it kind of like, oh yeah, people were talking shit about me, they thought I was gonna, and now I'm just gonna prove them out? Maybe there's something to that. Or is it just Devers being Devers? That's the type of player he is. He might start off slow, but once he gets going, he gets going, and no better example than right now.
Sometimes it's just about locking in and understanding the game plan. And I think in the case of Devers, when he started off this season, you mentioned with the 0-19 at the plate. Right. It's just when the whole goal of you being the DH is so that you could hit and you're not hitting, it's not exactly a recipe for success. Yeah. So I think one of those things is sometimes, you got to swallow the pride a little bit. Say, okay, this is the role that this team has assigned me. And there could be a little bit as well of like, you know what, fuck this team. I'm gonna show how skilled I am. And so there could certainly be that aspect to it. And so I think it's a combination of him getting himself locked in now and saying, okay, this is the game plan and I'm still being utilized. They still see me as an asset. It's just as an asset in a different way. And just locking into the game plan saying, you know what, like I could contribute to this ball club and being able to get a couple of hits. But I think sometimes that's all it is. It's just a mindset shift and saying, okay, this is what my role is now. And they still expect a lot out of me and I could perform at this. It's not like they're moving him from like third baseman to play in the outfield and having him do something that's not natural to him. It's just kind of having him be DH. And I can understand from like, I imagine from a salary aspect, you're a lot more valuable if you could also play out on the field as opposed to just being a hitter. So I'm sure that also has a factor to it as well. But sometimes it's just about locking in. And I think that's what's happening with Devers there.
I think there's an adjustment also people don't realize. You go from being on the field, on defense and on offense, right? It's not just about producing on defense. It's about just you're in the game. And now half of the game, you're just sitting on the bench waiting for your at-bat. There's a feeling of you might not be contributing to your team's success, or you think that you could. They're all competitors, these professional athletes. They all want to compete. They all want to prove that they can contribute on any side of the ball, either be offense or defense. And you're kind of taken away. It's also been a position he's played there since he's been a Red Sox. He's been their third baseman. There has been nobody else. And so to bring in a guy on the off season, it'll number one, it makes you go, wait a minute. I'm the third. You're bringing in another obviously great player in Bregman. Don't get me wrong. That's why he's playing third base. But yeah, I think there's a little mindset shift that has to happen, and also an adjustment period, just because you're not playing. The flow has to be different. You have to get used to being sitting down and then going, it's time for me to go and do my job now. So it's a great adjustment, and hopefully it keeps it going. And I'd love to see Rafael Devers here get himself in the MVP talk by mid-season. Let's see. I think he's capable of doing so. I know Judge and Ohtani and all these, well, in the American League, let's stick to the American League. I know Judge is kind of running away with the MVP talks right now, but you never know. And I'm really hoping that he works himself into the MVP talk by mid-season here. Another thing here, another storyline that kind of gets me perplexed, but I'm never surprised when it comes to the Pittsburgh Pirates, because they seem to be such a poorly managed team as far as building a winning baseball team. It seems like they have no interest in winning games. They have solely interest in sticking to what's been, I guess, making money for them. Who knows? Yeah. I know we've seen it in other sports like the NFL for years. I always wondered why the Cincinnati Bengals were always, they barely win any football games, and then you find out that they're just there to make money. Really, the management has no interest in trying to build a winning team, and you're like, I don't understand this, but whatever. You treat the team as a business. That's what seems to happen. A lot of questionable calls being made by the organization, including trade rumors from their star pitcher, Paul Skeens, which has been there for for just barely a season. Rookie season last year, dominated, won Rookie of the Year. He's probably one of the Cy Young favorites right now when it comes to the National League. Like, just a dominant pitcher. We all know how good he is. And to be part, either it's true or not. I mean, if the rumors are that strong that most media from ESPN to TSN, everybody talking about it, there's got to be some validity to these trade rumors. And then you go, he was a rookie last season. He's one of the best. He's one, if not the best pitcher in the league right now. And you're going to look to see what you can get back in return. Obviously, if he was to go in the trade market, you're going to get something big in return. But then my question well, what are you trying to get back? Are you trying to get back players that are going to make you a contender team? Because if you're going to be a contender, you're going to need Paul Skeens. You can't just trade away your best player to get one or two guys back that are not going to be as good or as effective as him to win baseball teams. So I'm not quite sure what the rumors, if they're at all, number one, true, but also if they are true, like, what are the Pittsburgh Pirates doing here if they're talking or thinking so early on in this guy's career to trade this guy?
Yeah, unfortunately, with a lot of baseball teams, we'll talk about another baseball team where they're just the organization's just a shit show over there.
Yeah.
But in the case of the Pirates, they've always just kind of mired in mediocrity. And, you have some baseball clubs where, they're not able to spend the big dollars, but what they're able to do is they do such a good job with their farm systems and their farm teams to be able to grow players from within so that they can at least be competitive. But Pittsburgh doesn't have that either. Like, at all. Like, other than Skeens, but Skeens was kind of a surefire thing when they selected him.
Right.
But, they haven't really been able to produce a lot from their farm teams as well so that they could at least keep themselves competitive, right? And balancing that. And that's what, some of the beauty of baseball could be is like, yeah, you've got your teams like the Dodgers or the Yankees or I guess the Mets as well. You could throw them in there. High spending teams that are going to pay big bucks for their stars. But you have other teams out in MLB that do a great job of being able to produce their own guys and produce their own players. The Kansas City Royals, are off the top of my head, have done a good job of producing some players,
right?
Especially in recent years. And so you got all that together. In the case of Skeens, it's just, I think it's just Pittsburgh being like what you said. There are teams like, we're going to be not bad enough where we're going to lose ticket sales, but not great enough where we got, take that next step to go into the playoffs and be competitive every year. We're comfortable with how we're kind of breaking in dollars. We're going to find some ways to cut back on certain elements. And Bob Nutting's the owner of the Pirates. He's content with that. And I think that's a shame for the people of Pittsburgh, and a shame for, the guys that go and play for the Pirates as well. You think Paul Skeens sitting there thinking, oh, I'll just be comfortable and I'll just, play baseball for the Pirates. No, that's a guy that wants to win. You could tell right away that he wants to win.
Absolutely.
And he wants to have a lot of success. I'm unfortunately not surprised about the trade rumors about Paul Skeens, especially with the way that the Pirates have put their teams together in the last couple of years. And, it would be one thing if it's like they're able to get a bunch of prospects back and, they could build so that they can all come together and they can have a young team that they could work with. And if they get to the playoffs, it's great for them, but they're able to do it on the cheap. I mean, that's what it comes to at the end of the day, is like, is Bob Nutting really willing to spend a lot of money on Paul Skeens and then go from there to spend more money on other players to create a supporting cast around him, whether it be in the top 5 starting pitchers or a hitting core or even a fielding team? It's clearly, the Pirates don't have that sort of aspiration. So it's unfortunate. I'm not shocked. I would throw my hat and bang my head into the wall if somehow he goes to the Dodgers. It's like, because that's what the Dodgers need, is another pitcher that's an all-worldly pitcher. But,
Dodgers
if he goes,
or Yankees.
Or the Yankees, yeah. Like, if it's one of those teams, heck, even the Mets at this point, like, the Mets would be more funny that, of course, Paul Skeens would go to the Mets. Yeah. Like, what are the Mets going to do with him? But yeah, it's unfortunate, but I'm not surprised.
Yeah. From one poorly managed team to another poorly managed team. The Rockies started their season a record, not a record that I would ever want as a team, but 8-42, the worst first 50 games in Major League history. I don't even know what to say about this team. It's just like, I can't remember the last time they were successful. They've made it to the playoffs. They are always at the bottom when it comes to the NL West. 8-42 is laughable. I mean, the second worst team, I think, is 15 wins, I think, with the White Sox. So, it's just another example of a team being okay and being mediocre. But the thing that worries me about all this is the players. It's like, what happens to all these players you have on your team that has aspirations of being champions or being better? You're not building a winning culture, number one. So the attitude and the players around that are in the organization end up paying for it. Same thing in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh has had they drafted Paul Skeens first a couple of years ago, but even a few years before that, they had the number 1 pick. They drafted Henry Davis, which was a really high scouted catcher, and he hasn't really amounted to much, probably not because he's not talented, but because he's part of a system that just doesn't seem to put winning as a priority. And then it kind of fucks with your psyche and your head, and you're like, I'm just going to be part of this team to have this role or whatever it means. So I think the same thing is happening with the Rockies. There's not much to say on my part here. I don't know if you have anything to add to the Rockies. I'm just blown away that year after years we just don't expect much from the Rockies.
Yeah, we look at last year's Chicago White Sox and we go, wow, it can't be any worse, can it? And the Rockies said, well, hold my beer.
Yeah.
We'll show you. Yeah, it's just like, I had heard some rumblings about this Rockies team and looking at them, and I was listening to some MLB analysts is like, you think the White Sox were bad last year? Wait till the Rockies hit the field this year.
Right.
And again, it just goes back to ownership and not being able to invest in the team, and it's unfortunate. Like, it really is. I could think of the old Rockies teams of the late 90s with Todd Helton and Larry Walker and, playing on those teams. And even, when I was, getting into baseball, like I remember Jeff Francis was the pitcher and they were always focused on him because he was the Canadian, right?
Right.
Oh my gosh, we got the Canadian pitcher and he's playing for the Rockies. And we're like, all right, well, I now know I'm probably one of the few people that know about Jeff Francis's career more than a lot of other people. But yeah, and then ever since then, it's just a poorly run franchise, just plain and simple. And they're just a shitty baseball team and they're not able to get things going. And I think it goes back to, and I think there is kind of a bigger issue at play here in MLB where with some leagues, you're going to have your 1 or 2 bad owners and, teams that are not going to invest. But I don't know about you, I could be wrong here, but it seems like it's a little bit more prevalent in baseball right now than it is in other leagues where it's just these owners are just not willing to invest and spend money.
Absolutely.
Like you can criticize the Dodgers and the Yankees and all these big spending teams all you want, but it feels like, we talk about with the Commanders with Dan Snyder and just how, like, when he owned the team, it was just a train wreck and he needed to be gone long ago. And there's certainly, I'm not saying every team in the NFL has great owners. I'm a Cowboys fan. I can tell you that for a fact, but at least, they were at least competent and could put together some winning teams you had your lower owners like your Jimmy Haslams, I would say is a lower tier owner. But in baseball, it just seems like the Angels, the Rockies, the White Sox, I could go on and go on about some of the lower, the Pirates as well. Like just ownership, that's like 4, close to 5 right there I could think of off the top of my head. I'm sure if I were to go through some of the organizations, you could probably find some not so great owners. I don't know if this is just a baseball issue or just where we're at in the time frame or whatnot, but it just seems like baseball doesn't have the best owners looking out for the league. The Marlins is another one I think of when the not great owners
have been knocked.
Athletics,
there's not any better
that's
example
6 right
than
there that I
Athletics,
could think of.
right?
So.
Rockies, Pirates, Athletics, Marlins. Then pretty much every bottom dwelling team in the divisions right now, which is except for the Orioles, which that's another
they got new
story.
owners. If it was the previous owners, I would throw them in there.
Right. The Sox. I mean, you got the Athletics that are surprising, winning 22 and 30 right now. That I think a lot of people are expecting the Athletic to be where the White Sox or the Rockies are right now, which is based on the fact that they're playing in a temporary location, which I hear is a mess and they're complaining about, but that might be a different story for a different day. But yeah, I think there's a lot of just owners and teams just not willing to spend any money, and I don't know if it's like they kind of reserved themselves to we're not going to be able to compete with these big markets like the Dodgers and the Mets and the Yankees and all these teams, but at the end of the day, I think it's not good for the league when you have we're able to name 6 teams here. You know what I mean? It's a lot of teams if you in the league that are being poorly managed right now, and where the roster is so vast. You have so many players on that roster, and so you're wasting so much potential talent just on the way you run your team. And that to me is the biggest factor in all this. Because I think it has an impact on some of these players' career where they end up playing. Nobody wants to get drafted by the Rockies. Nobody wants to get drafted to go play in Chicago for the White Sox in Chicago. So then you go like what happens, and then you have what happened what's happening in Chicago right now with Roberts, which when he was drafted, when he started playing, Lewis Roberts was touted to be a really good rookie and a really good, potentially good baseball player. Now he's been playing in Chicago for 4-5 years now, and look at his career. Mediocre at best, and he's been part of trade rumors for the last 2 or 3 seasons. So it's like, it sucks because it doesn't help him become a better baseball player. It doesn't. We've seen that. He's way better than he's been. He has the potential to be way better than he is in Roberts that I'm talking about. And we're seeing what playing for a bad managed team does. So hopefully there's changes ahead. We can make changes to this type of stuff in the major leagues. 2 more points I want to run through before we end the show. Juan Soto in New York, not the start to the season. I heard a stat yesterday. He leads the league in double play, ending double play ground outs into double play, I think with 9 already early in the season. A lot of things going on there. I think you saw, look, I don't want to put myself in his head. I don't know what's going on. Obviously, he signed the biggest contract in the history, like was it $625 million? Is that what he ended up signing for? Right?
I thought it was like $700 million.
Right, $700 million. Sorry,
yeah.
600.
A lot of money.
Right, a lot of fucking money. Makes me question if he chose money over playing where he wanted to play. Because I think he had a great season last year with the Yankees. Him and Judge. I mean, 2 things here that were surprising to me. Number one, the Yankees are right there. So why would you go to a franchise that's been so volatile, let's say that, in the New York Mets, just for money? It's kind of obvious, right, that it was for the money. And for what? For what, really? Because I think the Yankees offered him almost as much, but he chose to go for the Mets. And look, I'm not here to pass judgment. You want to sign for the most amount of money so that you're set for the future and your family's future, your kids are not going to be able to have to work a day in their life. I get all that. Wealth is wealth. I understand that. But as an athlete, I think you could see, maybe I'm wrong. Again, I'm not in his head. But if I had to take a guess here, I'm kind of seeing someone that's a bit regretful of the decision he made with by signing for the money and going with the Mets. And the Mets are not even doing that bad. That's what's worst about this. They're second in their division behind the Phillies. And they're most likely a playoff team if you really look at everything, how everything is going to fall. So, yeah, it's kind of a little bit of, I think we're expecting Soto to sign this big contract and have this MVP type season. And right now he's not even close to having an MVP type season. So it's kind of a bit disappointing.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, Soto's was pretty clear leading, even during the playoffs when it was with the Yankees, like, oh, I'm just going to sign with the highest bidder. Like, right. I'm gonna sign for the team that's gonna give me the most money. It's like, yeah, fair play to him. He's honest. It's like, right. Like if they're gonna sign me to $700 million or whatever for my contract, who am I to say no, right?
Absolutely.
And so I understand that from his point, and you could argue, I mean, he won a World Series with Washington, if I recall, and he's been to a World Series with the Yankees, obviously. So he's had success, and he's got some great stats behind him, But I think sometimes when you sign the big deal, it's like, all right, I'm good. Yeah. I'll play, and it's the Mets, right? So it's like you're always gonna get. I think volatile is a great word for it, because sometimes with the Mets, it's like all of a sudden they have everything comes together and they're great, and then you have the Mets other end where it's like the most random, weirdest thing will happen, and it would only happen to the Mets.
Absolutely.
Where it would happen to them, right? So I mean, I guess I shouldn't be too shocked that Soto's kind of going off to a bad start. I think he's a good enough player where, and just reading some of the articles, I saw there was a player that had reached out to him saying that he would be willing to help. Dwight Gooden has reached out to him and said, hey, I'll help you out, try and get out of this slump. He's kind of been adjusting the lineup as well. So he seems open to it. He's obviously aware that he's not playing where he should be.
Right.
And so the thing I will say about Soto as well, yes, he's gone out there and talked about, I'm going to get the highest bidder, and I'm going to go. He is still competitive though. Like we saw with a Soto shuffle all the way down. Like, guy likes to compete. So I think it's kind of a slump right now. I think he will eventually figure it out. All good ball players are able to figure it out. Mm-hmm. And I think he will eventually figure it out. But obviously right now it is kind of funny because it is the Mets and they've spent all this money and it is like this player. So there is that sort of element, but I do think he will eventually figure it out.
I think it'd be a lot worse right now if they were at the bottom of their division, not winning baseball.
Much more prominent if they were last. Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that they're winning baseball games right now, so it's kind of a non-issue right now. But I guarantee you, if they start losing and start dropping in their division, it's good. And Soto's still not performing as he should be. I think it's going to become a bigger factor. One last point in baseball, it was announced yesterday, I think, that Ohtani is going to be pitching a simulated game. So I don't know if we can expect Ohtani to pitch this season. I know they've been dealing with some injuries and a bit of inconsistency, but the Dodgers are still at the top of their division. They're still one of the best teams, if not the best teams in the league. Yeah, look, I've always said about Ohtani that you only had a couple more years as far as a pitcher for him. I think after the Dodgers spent all this money on him, I think after a few seasons, even if without this injury, if he hadn't gone through this injury, having Tommy John surgery last year, I think he'd be pitching right now. But I don't think that's the long term. I think after a few years, you're just going to have him either be DH and be there offensively. Obviously, he's a tank when it comes to producing offensively. But for the Dodgers right now, if they can get him back in the rotation as far as a pitcher, I mean, sky's the limit, because we know how dominant he can be on the mound. And if he's coming back from this injury and he starts having success on the mound, I think this is a great thing for the Dodgers and a bad thing for the rest of the National League and eventually the American League team that's going to have to face them. It may be in the in the finals and the World Series. Yeah, it's great to see him back, and great to see that he will be eventually be pitching, because I love seeing him pitch. I'm a guy that loves pitchers. That's my number one thing when it comes to baseball. I love watching dominant pitching. It's always been what I love the most about baseball. Obviously, I love seeing offense and great defensive plays, but great pitching for me is what keeps me dialed in when I'm watching a baseball game.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's exciting to see. I'm excited for him. I just hope that he's able to balance both things for the moment and not having that lingering injury, because it is the second time that he does get Tommy John surgery, I believe. So it's like, are the Dodgers willing to invest that much money and have him be potentially out again in maybe a couple of years due to him pitching too much? Yeah. It waits to be seen, but for now, I'll just take it and have Ohtani be more in the spotlight. It's great for the game.
Yep, for sure. I will say, if Ohtani gets injured again, if it's another Tommy John or whatnot, that's it in terms of his pitching. Because even if he could pitch afterwards, I think, like what you mentioned with the Dodgers, I think they just look at it as like, all right, we got to protect an asset here. We know he could still hit at a high level, and so we'll kind of look at the pluses and minuses when it comes to this. So, but if he gets another injury that involves his throwing arm, I'm pretty confident that's going to be it in terms of the pitching. Right. I think because it's Ohtani and because of how much money they spent on Ohtani, we were talking about Soto earlier, spending so much on him coming to the Dodgers. I do believe that you'd still have to try and see what you've got from a pitching aspect, because like what you mentioned, when he's fully healthy as a pitcher, like, he's a strong pitcher and he can be in a Cy Young consideration. And oh, by the way, this guy also could hit 50 home runs in a year. So like, you got to look at it, right? So, but if he gets injured again, that's it for Ohtani. They'll say, all right, we're good. We got what we wanted from the pitching aspect with him. We don't want to, sacrifice the asset even more. And we'll just keep him in as a hitter. But as a fan, as somebody that watches baseball and wants to see guys do all these crazy things, I want to see Ohtani be able to pitch, and also, by the way, I'm going to hit a home run while I'm at it. So that's what I kind of want to see as a fan, but there is certainly that health aspect once it comes to him returning to the mound.
Absolutely. Yeah, all good things ahead. Another great week in sports this week. I'm looking forward to the great weekend, some basketball games, some hockey games, more baseball next week. I know we said last week that it was going to be our last episode for a while, but we made it to episode 12 right now, so a dirty dozen. Maybe we'll be back, maybe we won't. I guess it depends on if I'm busy or whatever the case may be, and if we have some time, or some big news again during this summer. But again, I said it last week, Zach, thanks again for being part of Blue Collar Sports and being the anchor when it comes to sports talk right here on this show. Great content. Looking forward to talking to you again. And to everybody that's been listening to Blue Collar Sports and commentating on our videos, either it be on our shorts on YouTube or on Instagram, thank you. Thanks for the support. If you haven't done so yet, you can go ahead and follow Blue Collar Sports on Instagram, SVG TV on YouTube. That's where the show is I wouldn't say live, but that's where it's listed.
Yeah.
And Savage Paulson, myself on Instagram, Zach McGibbon Media on Instagram. Zach, once again, thanks for tagging along this week. Thanks for giving me your time, and hopefully we'll talk soon, and we'll talk some more sports on Blue Collar Sports.